Acquaintances, we need your help.
Holy halibut, it's the chief!
Thank you for the introduction, Quickster, but we all know who I am.
My name's James Barbatano.
Hi, James. How are
I
you?
live in Saline, Michigan, and I'm something of like a young author myself. I've had 2 children's books published, and
No way. Wow.
and I'm trying to work more on my writing skills, but it's been kind of slow lately.
Yeah.
So my first question.
What were your books? What did
Oh
you
yeah,
write?
sure. My first one was a picture book called Dragon Library, which was about 3 dragons who run a little library for both humans and monsters alike.
I love it. That's a great idea. Did you illustrate it too?
No, I wrote the story. The publisher I sent it to, Fifth Avenue Press, which is here in Michigan, they hired an illustrator named Douglas Bosley. He did a wonderful job, and he's a wonderful illustrator. Good guy. You'd like him.
You lucked out then, because you never know what you're going to get, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so did you write the publisher cold, or did you have an agent or someone as an advocate? How did you get the deal?
Oh, Fifth Avenue Press has a submission site on the Ann Arbor District Library website.
Wow, that was very industrious of you, man. So congratulations. That's huge.
Thank you.
So what questions did you want to discuss was it about writing?
Yeah. My first question is, what's your writing process like? Do you do a lot of brainstorming and outlining, or are you a free writer? Like, do you just write by the seat of your pants, like Stephen King?
No, I'm completely outliner and planner. I'm not, so I'm not that quick-witted, so I have to really just figure everything out in advance. Let me, while I'm talking, let me clean this thing. It looks like it's a little bit musty up here. Is that any better?
Yeah, that's better.
Because you guys look crystal clear. So I have to outline everything, James. So I also have to know what the ending is. And I usually back engineer from the ending, actually. If I'm writing a TV show or something like that, I'll know where I'm going, and then I'll back engineer the rest of it from the ending.
Sorry.
No.
So, you have the ending and you're doing the beginning and then writing for everything in between, or just like ending and then writing up to the beginning?
I should have clarified. You're right. That isn't very clear at all. The way that I write, say if I'm writing for a children's show that has episodes and it's probably a 10-minute story, I'll think of an image that I like that I think is funny, or a circumstance that I think is funny, and I have no idea how that could happen. So I write down different endings, and then I think of, okay, what are different ways that this could come about that would be fun, that wouldn't give it away? So that's what I meant by back engineering. Much like, when they talk about in science fiction stories, the government secretly having UFOs, and they have to back engineer what they take apart to figure out how it works. So it's like that for me, writing a story. Everybody's different, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I didn't know that Stephen King wrote by the seat of his pants. I would have thought that he plans everything out, so I'm surprised to hear that.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Well, I guess it's my turn for me to introduce myself now. Well, obviously my name's Dryw, even though it's not trying to find the area where I can like point to my name, even though it's spelled weird. It's it's a Welsh spelling. I thank my mom for it every day, or whatever. But I'm
I love
a
it. I'm Welsh too, uh, half Swedish and half sort of Welsh, English, Scotch.
we're we're a family. I come from a family of mutts, so but my, my birth father. I'm not gonna get into that detail, but like half German or whatever, and then like the other side of the family's mutts, and my mom just found it was like, oh, it's like this is a cool name inside this Welsh name book. It's like, all right,
Oh,
but anyway,
I
I'm a
love it.
voice actor for the most part. I have a couple credits through a
Great.
couple of my friends' YouTube videos, but I'm also going through Todd's Think Tank like projects or whatever right now with the Mama's Ducks program.
Great.
Not program, but show.
Great.
And I kind of got started doing little voiceover skits through my own little mini series based on a franchise that I'm very not intimate's not the right word, but very dedicated to, very close to my heart kind of
Yeah.
stuff or whatever, based on like just an old Japanese property or whatever, that those kind of things or whatever, because I love the story writing, I love all that kind of stuff or whatever. I'm getting ahead of myself. I guess for my question, and Doug already kind of sent you the question
Well,
like
before you
ahead of time.
say that, Drew. So,
Hmm.
so you're a voice actor, but you also write. Is that correct?
Kind, it's more of an improvisation.
Oh, you're an improv actor kind of thing.
Yeah, I had a little bit of training of improv, but it's more of like voice acting through like also comedy or whatever. So I it's a weird process, but I'm trying to get better. I've taken classes for screenwriting and stuff.
Well,
So but
improv is the most fascinating thing ever, I think, because often try to, because I'm not, you know, like I said, not like a quick-witted type person, but I realized that when you write, which is what I do, you're improvising.
mhm.
So it's an interesting thing to think about, that the act of improvisation it works both with as a writer, or if you're an actor and doing comedy or sketches like that. The difference is that one is verbal and one is written down as it's non-verbal.
Mhm.
So I guess a better way to say it, I've never really thought about this before this way, but it seems true to me that I'm basically non-verbal. So that's
Hey,
why I worked as a writer. But we both share that we improvise.
hmm so I guess my question, and I guess it kind of ties into something that I mentioned earlier, was something that you can put in your words. What
Yeah.
stuff from your past when you've written for characters and I've seen in your resume you've written for all these networks, all these people or whatever. What stuff from your past has inspired your writing or for characters that you've written for, I guess?
No, that's the greatest question. I mean, where do ideas come from, and is how much is made up, and what's the emotional through line in your life that you continue on in your storytelling? So I think for me it was that I wrote comedy because I was very lucky with my home life with my parents. They were super nice people and very funny. You know, kind of like my father was kind of jolly, and my mother was the life of the party, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And they were really nice to us. You know what I mean? So I think that I had such a comfort. I mean, I was lucky. I didn't realize that till later, of course, but I think that that's why I ended up as a comedy writer, because I was happy. You know, so I think that that would be the main thing that I draw upon, was the happiness of my childhood. So, and I think that's why when I write stories or something like that, I tend to make them either something super horrible to contrast with the happiness that I feel, or to make it so that it's super happy. So just kind of an extremist as a writer. So I think that's where it came from. I got known as kind of an extreme writer. I write crazy things. I wrote for the crazier comedians and stuff. So I think it was because I had a grounded childhood And that's really where it came from. I mean, that's a really good question. That's how I would analyze it if I'm trying to be real about it. It's an interesting question for sure.
Yeah. I yeah, Jenna, did you want to ask anything right now, or?
Well, I was going to introduce myself.
Yeah,
Obviously, my
that's
name.
what I meant.
Obviously, my name is Jenna, and I
Yeah.
am a drawer and writer. And something that I was able to do was publish a book of an original story that I am currently making. It's called Beast Course, and the book
Called
that
what?
I published,
I'm sorry, Jenna. It's called what?
Beast Course.
Oh, cool.
And the thing is that it was made back in 2019, and it's obviously out. It's a little bit outdated to what I'm currently making. Like, a lot of things has changed from those 3 years or so. So a lot of things are a little bit outdated from that 2019 story. But it's an accomplishment
I'll say.
of mine.
This was a. I'm sorry. This was a book, a comic book. Was it a? What was the? What did you get published?
It was more of a storybook that
Oh.
had occasional pictures in it.
Oh, cool. So you had an illustrator, or did you do the illustrations, or?
Yes, I did all the illustrations.
Oh man, I'd love to see it. I always like when people illustrate their own books. It always has an extra dimension to it, you know.
Yeah, even though it's my 2019 drawing, and obviously my drawing has improved since then. So.
Well, I see
Yeah.
what you mean now.
There's always the extra layer of creativity or extra layer of the person. I think when you have like somebody doing both like writing and the art, so to speak. I guess at least from
agree.
my perspective.
I agree. It's all those are always the most interesting things to me when it says written and illustrated by, you know. So in some of the TV shows, like Phineas and Ferb, the guys who drew it wrote it. You know, I mean, so I would write stories for them, and I don't draw. I'm not a good artist, but they would then write the actual script of the story of the board and draw it, and that's why the show was so good. I think, it came out really well. Because
It definitely was. I'm sorry.
no. I mean, but I think that's why, Dryw, is because of so Jenna. I think that I would love to see your book, because those are the things that fascinate me, seeing multiple dimensions of creativity. You know.
Yeah, even though it's a 2-year-old book. So.
What's it about, by the way?
It's about these two characters, Nathan and Dylan, and then they discover these gumdrop-shaped creatures that can transform into beasts. Like, one transforms into a dragon, and one transforms into a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I know I'm very childish, but
That sounds good.
So, and there's this overarching plot going on, and just interesting things are going to happen in that story.
It sounds cool.
There's one thing I wanted to point out, and especially something you said with the whole creating thing with the creators of the show. It also kind of reminded me of who was it? Was it Dave Filoni? Like, if you'd seen that whole thing with the Mandalorian, where they says like, oh, the director and his children did a pre-production or whatever, or a storyboard for their thing, and they had like the little Mandalorian or whatever figures or whatever. They did all that. It's and that's something similar to my thing or whatever. When I think of like a storyboard or whenever I think of a story or whatever, I have like a whole room of stuff like right behind me or whatever. Like, I think of like all these stories in my head. I just need to put them down on paper.
Well, I have an interesting story about that, but so remind me of that, because I wanted to tell you about something I experienced over at Disney, working with a guy using models and stuff. But Jenna, what was your question? I'm sorry, I got distracted.
My question that I wanted to ask was, were there any characters or story elements that you really wanted to add into the various shows that you written for or were involved in, but you had to cut them out for various reasons?
Oh my goodness, that's a good question. And yes, that did happen twice. Uh, I, I, because when you work on a TV show, for example, you have to write probably twice as much as is on the screen, I would say, or twice or a little more than twice. So in other words, I wrote many, many stories that never even made it, mostly because they were lousy, but sometimes they were good and it just didn't work, or, you know what I mean? And when I say lousy, it means that I didn't have it figured out well enough to be presented in a convincing way. but I wouldn't pass anything in that I didn't think that didn't interest me and have something I thought was funny. But sometimes other people just don't. Was unable to present it in a way that it was funny. So two ideas in particular were that I wanted to have made into shows. One was on Phineas and Ferb, and that was where their mom. But you guys know the show?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a few.
I know about.
Very familiar.
Oh, good. Well, the idea was to get mom involved in because mom never sees what's going on, ever. So I wanted there to be something where she thinks that she's been hypnotized or something like that. I forget what the setup was, but the story basically was that she ends up on these flying brooms that the boys have made in the backyard. And she's part of the adventure when they have to save something and do something, and she's part of it, but she thinks that it's all just an illusion. So that for the first time, she actually sees what they're actually building, this big machine that makes them fly and everything. And she's part of it, but she's saying, oh yeah, she's having fun, but she thinks that it's all just an illusion. So Candace is frustrated at the end because in the end, even though mom was there the whole time and participated, she thinks it all just didn't happen. So that was the idea of the story I wanted to do.
I could definitely see that.
It would have worked out pretty good, but Swampy shot it down because he said, dude, you're going to have them in the sky all the time. And it's going to be a static image. He says, I said, no, you could put clouds behind it. What are you talking about? He says, trust me, this particular idea, I don't want to do, maybe we can do it later, but it got shot down. So that's one that I wanted to do. And another was a story for another show for Jim Henson, which was about a girl who didn't speak, but she could communicate with others by imitating the calls of birds. And I had the story worked out as really a sweet story, and she eventually teaches everybody how to talk like that. But that was another one I wanted to do that just never I couldn't get off the ground. I couldn't present those ideas correctly in order to get, sometimes it's more than the story, it's the way you present them that makes it live or die, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I definitely have those moments where I wanted to add this in, but the more that I develop the story, the more I realize this may not work.
Yeah, that happens to me quite a bit, Jenna, actually. Sometimes on one of I've done 4 books. I mean, 2 of them were Adventure Time books. And my wife read it the night before I had to pass it in. No, the night after I passed it in, she read the beginning part. And she said, listen, all these 4 chapters here, it just is all bogged down. You should have cut those out. And I read over it and I said, oh my God, she's right. So I called the publisher, the editor, and I said, I screwed up. I said, I need to cut the chapters 2 through 5 or something like that, whatever it was. This is a long time ago. And he said, are you sure? And I wrote down the argument about it. And then he agreed. He said, you're right. And so I was lucky that I was able to cut that out as a result of my wife saying that, because the book was way, way better without all that stuff bogging you down in the front. It was too much.
Because obviously you don't really want to introduce too many ideas, because then you wouldn't have enough time for some ideas to breathe.
Oh my goodness, that's exactly correct. And that's what happened. I was taking the reader all over the place in different directions, and it's just what you just said. They didn't have time to breathe. It simpler is better. You know, sometimes I just get too complex with things, and that's always death to a writer, you know, when it gets too complicated.
Well, my second question was like, do you have a personal critic? Like, do you have somebody that you share your work with before you share it with others?
No, I mean, all these questions are super good, you guys, by the way. It just shows that you guys are actually involved in writing, because otherwise you wouldn't know what questions to ask. And these questions are all totally relevant to the problems of writing. And that is one of the most important things. And it's just as I was telling Jenna, answering her question about that I'm lucky that my wife reads everything that I write, and is my best critic and helps me when something's lousy. She'll tell me. So also when I send as I get older, I get kind of my mind gets clouded sometimes, and I have trouble focusing in sometimes. And so I want to make sure that the emails that I write, if it's a deal that I'm getting or a job or something, I have to summarize things down. It has to be really smart. And sometimes I'm dumb, you know? And so she'll read through all the emails, and I say, do I sound fawning here? Do I sound like I'm too, you know, kissing up to him? Or by being mean, by being so sharp about this? And she'll tell me, you know, and that's generally, that's one of the most helpful things for me, is actually her editing my emails. But also, like the example I gave Jenna with that book, she made the comment of that I just couldn't see because I was too deep into it. And it's like what Jenna said, I just was I wasn't letting the reader breathe. I mean, that was the perfect way to say it. So my wife is the one, James, who is my secret weapon, really. So it's one of the reasons why I've gotten so much work and I've been successful.
Interesting.
So very, very good question once again. Look, sometimes on working on a gig, you click with somebody who has abilities that kind of fit well with what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't draw, and I don't always conceptualize correctly, but this one guy, he used to draw models in his office. Not draw model. He would make models out of out of paper and out of what do you call that packing material? That white stuff that they make.
Styrofoam?
What?
Styrofoam?
Yes. He would cut the things out of styrofoam and then paint them. And in the Phineas and Ferb movie, Across the Second Dimension, there's a big scene that was very difficult to explain even with drawings. And so he actually built the set, a mini thing of the set, and showed us how it works. He had little dolls, little characters on strings and stuff like that. And so that was an example of someone actually what you were talking about before, James. Or no, it was Dryw, right? You were talking
Mm-hmm.
about how you represent ideas physically. And so that was what he did, and it was on one of my stories. I mean, I wrote that part of the film, and he envisioned it so perfectly. So that was just an interesting thing, walking in and see how he's taking. This is another important takeaway from that story, is that if you're working on a project and you find a way to express it that is different than usual by either using, you know, a mock-up or dolls or anything, to just do it. Just do it. And it'll be worthwhile and show certainly that you're making an effort to explain it better. And I found that the main thing is to try to think of ways that you can explain your ideas, because it's so ephemeral, especially when it's about comedy or action scenes, that are hard to describe because so many things are going on. So that was another good question.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure because you mentioned save it up for a little bit, and I was like, okay, I'll wait until like everything gets off to the side.
I'm
But
glad
I
you
mean,
did.
you don't have to answer this question, but I I don't know, this might have misread or whatever, but your daughter, what is it true? I didn't want to make sure I was misreading, make sure I'm correct or whatever. But your daughter was the voice actress for Vanessa and also Marceline
Yeah,
for that, and I actually thought that was really cool too. And like, I I guess in the best way, shortest way you can explain that. Like, what's it like for being a writer, but your child is in I guess in the same, not building or like industry or whatever, but I guess I don't know how to
yeah,
put
I
it. You know
understand.
what I mean?
I understand what you mean, and sure, that's a good question to close on because with my kids, Olivia is, in her 20s, and my son is just leaving his 20s, about 30 now, and so, well, I write with both kids. So just as my wife edits all my stuff, and she's a writer too, but both Olivia and Casey, my older son, and I are writing partners. We write, and they've done it since they were little kids because we would have comedians over for dinner all the time, or even stay with us, coming out from the East Coast when they had gigs. And so the kids are used to having creative people around who are always challenging them with funny stuff.
Hmm.
So, uh, so, so both kids ended up being very creative, and although my son he wanted to be a cop. He didn't want, because my daughter ended up as a singer. She was so good at singing that she ended up
Hmm.
in movies as a little kid.
Hmm.
But my son didn't want anything to do with showbiz, but he was still a really creative guy. So he would always top my jokes and stuff. When I would be at the dinner table and I'd tell them about the latest story I'm trying to figure out, they'll come up with, he would be the one, he's the brains of the family. He would come up with toppers for them a lot, how to improve it, to make it funnier, to make it crazier. So uh, the funny story of how that happened with Olivia and with the Vanessa thing, I worked with on a show called Rocco's Modern Life in way many years ago, and I worked in the office next to me were Dan and Swampy, who years later had created uh, Phineas and Ferb,
Hmm.
and so they knew both kids as little babies. So because I would bring them into work, and so so when Olivia started singing, Swampy had first called me up years later because they tried to pitch Phineas and Ferb for 16 years. I mean, with no
Oh.
success because it was such a weird show, and it certainly wasn't a Disney show. And they wanted them to change the character designs and everything, but they just said, "Look, why don't you just option it and get someone else to do it? Because we're not changing the character designs." And they said, "It's too complicated. Why don't you simplify?" We're not simplifying. It was like that. So Disney didn't have any shows at the time, so it was just pure luck that that show got on the air, because Disney had never done a show that complicated. I mean, there's 3 stories in every 10-minute story, and the designs of the characters, one was a triangle head, one had a rectangle. I mean, it was not totally un-Disney like. So it just was pure luck that that got on the air. And Dan and Swampy called me. Swampy called me from England. He was working in England. He said, "Hey, do you want to go into this meeting with us? It's not going to go on the air. It's with Disney, and the show's not a Disney show." And lo and behold, I ended up as head writer for it, and they bought it. And so because my daughter, they knew was a singer, they asked her, and she had never done a voice before on a show. They asked her if she would like to voice uh, Vanessa and sing on the show, and so that's how that happened. And years later, 5 years later, for 4 years later, Pendleton Ward, who created Adventure Time, came up to me, and I kind of knew him sort of, and he said, "Hey, I just heard that the the girl that does the voice of Vanessa is your daughter." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I'm creating the show now," and it turned out to be Adventure Time. He says, "And if it goes, her voice that I heard in as Vanessa is the voice that I imagined for one of my main characters, which turned out to be Marceline." So that's how that happened. It just was pure luck.
That's really cool. I really growing up, especially because Adventure Time was what around 2010ish, whatever, and like Adventure Time and Phineas and Ferb, those two were on, and those were just like I really enjoyed her. I really enjoyed some of the songs like she sang or whatever. I really it's I don't want to sound weird, but it's like because I come from a very music orientated family or whatever. I was just
Great.
really that was really astounding for me, but.
Well, I'd urge you guys, all of you guys, if any of you have musical talents, that to develop them in a show, because it's so profitable. It's writing songs is more profitable than doing books or TV shows. So if you ever get a chance to do that, think about it anyways. Even if you just write the lyrics for them, if you have a story, I would urge you to just write lyrics into the script.
Mhm.
Because that's what first time I did that, that's what I did. And lo and behold, they said, "Okay, we'll have our guy do the music." And I'm thinking, what? You're going to do it? I had no idea. That was the first song I ever wrote for TV. Just put the lyrics in the script, and then they liked it. And so they had the guy who scores the show write the music for it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It really is. And also, I think the main thing I would leave you with is that those examples I gave you, because your questions were so good, shows that you have to just feel free to try things, even if it's scary to do, or if you like in the case of doing music for stuff, just try things, and you never know. I mean, there's so much chance that's involved, and things are sort of chaotic out there, and that's the salvation for us all, because things are too complicated for really bad things to happen. I mean, because even in government situations and so on, the main thing is just to try to free your mind from fear and be able to do stuff that that you really want to do and you feel in your heart is good stuff. And don't be afraid to do that. That can never lose. You know.
Mhm.
So I guess that's. And sorry, I have a cold, so I'm blowing my nose.
And one more thing, if you heard some noise in the background, that's because it's my bird. His name's Ralph.
And yeah, I just got back from a trip with my crap, my wedding ring's not on my finger. I just got married about 2 months ago.
Wow.
Me and my wife went on a makeup honeymoon because we just had a terrible time on the first
Wow.
go. So I'm just tired. She doesn't drive, so I had to drive all the way home. But
Well, congratulations. That's the greatest thing ever. And Jenna, thanks for solving the mystery of the noises, because I was wondering where that was.
Yes. Ralph is the unofficial fourth member of the podcast.
Well, this is really fun, you guys. Thanks for having me to talk about writing. I mean, it's what I'm most interested in, and it's my favorite thing. So I really appreciate your questions. They were excellent.
Hey guys, this is Dryw. So either you already probably watched it or I've stitched this to the front. So anyway, this video was recorded about 4 to 5 years ago when we started doing the show, when I got started the project. And it really shows audio quality, camera quality, just the way I ask questions. So I'm glad that I've improved as somebody, as an interviewer and other stuff, and I'm very grateful for what Think Tank has done for me in all forms of the matter. So I just want to say, I hope you guys enjoyed or enjoy this interview with Martin Olson. and I'm looking forward to a couple more. So look out for more interviews, and or if you want to suggest some people or have any contacts with people that we can get a hold of, just send them our way. So again, this is Dryw. This is the main editor and host of M.I.Diverse, and I will see you guys later.